to learn the martial arts.
Big surprise. Huge surprise.
I'm starting to get in a bad mood, you know? Maybe it's like a mood swing, my hormones, I don't know. You know, maybe it's my need to impose my will.
Good evening. You're listening live to Kickin' It, the action, adventure, martial arts / wherever the hell we want it to be movie review show here from me, Rob, the maker of it, as well as my host, the real Dr. V. Dr. V, I'm so excited. I want to take a breath and slow down. How are you this evening, sir?
I am doing great. I'm just still watching this movie. I only got a couple, 20 minutes left of it, but it's what I can say about this movie. It is fan-fucking-tastic.
The movie, of course, that he's referencing as people join the stream here is Abraham Lincoln, Vampire Hunter. So some backstories people fill in here. The reason why we picked this movie to review, besides it being a fan favorite, an oldie but a goodie, as they say, is Eglinton and I, Eglinton from I Love Comics, homegrown tourist, old man comics, yada yada yada. We had had an argument over one of the better movies of 2012, and I had Abraham Lincoln, Vampire Hunter, very high on my list. And Eglinton thought, no, that's not it. But he had Avengers really, really high up, and I didn't. So the thought occurred to me, because Avengers was such a big movie, what's really the more fun movie, the Avengers or Abraham Lincoln, Vampire Hunter? So I put it up for a Twitter poll, and to Eglinton's chagrin, of course, it lost. And I tweeted out to the mostly what I thought was the comic books crowd, because I'm unfamiliar with them, thinking, okay, there's Abraham Lincoln's going to get their ass kicked, and we'll still review it anyway. Is what I was really going to do. So, Doctor, it occurs to me that we hadn't really talked about it, except for offline a moment ago, but you had not seen this film.
I'll admit, I have not seen this. I had never seen this film before until today. I had seen it was out, and I was like, really? I just kind of poo-pooed it away, because I just like, this looks really corny. It looks really hokey. I was like, nah, I didn't want to watch it. Well, now I'm kicking myself in the foot. I'm like, why the hell did I not watch this? It is such a great movie.
I know I kind of like slow burns and sometimes action movies that don't necessarily have tons of over-the-top action, as far as, like, say, John Wick and more recent ones that just you get numb to it. This one is, to quote Dalton the Authenticator, who was on a previous stream recently when we were doing some reviews of other vampire movies, he basically felt a little disappointed in the reboot of Fright Night, because he said it's campy. They should have went full camp. And you know what? That's correct, because this movie does exactly that. But I was drawn in by the hook, and not a lot of times a movie can hook me with their premise. And the premise here is simple. Abraham Lincoln, Honest Abe, the skinny tall dude from Illinois, writing, by the fireplace using coal and all that crap, reading books and stuff. The historic figure that we've come to know, or not know, the way education is these days. They take him and basically say, what if he hunted vampires and the Civil War was a front for the entire battle of man versus vampires? And it sounds hokey. It does sound silly. You're absolutely right. But I love it, and it absolutely works for what they're trying to do in this film. And that's one of the basic things I wanted to start the movie off by saying, is that there's a level of earnestness in here where I think a lot of it has to do with the lead actor, but also the way it's shot. This movie is a beautiful film to look at. It's a beautiful film to watch. The score is forgettable as far as I'm concerned there, but there's plenty of voiceover work. And the guy who plays Abraham Lincoln's pretty much a newcomer. This movie was in 2012, but he played, I think, in 2016 or 17. He played Patrick Bateman for the American Psycho musical that got really popular. So I did not know that either. But man, this guy nails it. Just over-the-top action. And something about Abraham Lincoln, an American swinging that axe, reminds me of like Chuck Norris before Chuck Norris was born. I don't know why. So your initial thoughts, you said you thought it was kind of hokey and corny and you can't believe it, and now you're pretty much done seeing it. Just overall, what's your take on the film?
My overall take of this: Avengers sucks. This movie is way better than it.
We had some people
Ben,
actually say the same thing too, so I'm glad you agree.
Avengers, you can watch it. You can watch a movie like one time. That's it. It's a one and done throwaway,
Hmm.
and like it's dragged out. This is actually pretty cool. Not only are you taken back to that time period, the 1850s, 1860s. It's dude. You got a guy swinging an axe, killing vampires. You got Benjamin Walker. Dude, that guy's been in some other movies as well. Um, I just saw he was in the Heart of the Sea. He was in there, and where I just recently saw him. I saw him in Jessica Jones season 3.
Oh,
He
okay.
was the only. He was the only good part of that season or series. He was in Shimmer Lake, War Boys. So, I mean, the guy's a really good actor. Uh, I for his height though, he's like 6'2", so I don't really see him getting much roles. I mean, he was perfect choice for this one because it's Abraham Lincoln's freaking tall.
Yeah, 6'4" is
So
what I always thought, but yeah,
so I mean,
6'2" looks
yeah,
tall on
but
screen.
I would watch more movies based around not Abraham Lincoln. But like with this guy in doing action films. Um,
Yeah, I
he
would
plays
too.
he plays the meek, mild Abraham Lincoln. But then when he gets like fighting, like it's like, dude, he said it's like Chuck Norris, man.
Yeah, yeah.
Chuck Norris, Jackie Chan kind of mixed together a little bit, you know.
Well, the thing about it, where it starts off, and there's really almost no waste for it. There's some voiceover work about it, and I always love a good movie that starts off with some sort of quote, whether it's from a Bible or not. That this, you get some sort of sense of impending doom or foreshadowing. I pop for that. I mark for it. That's just me personally. But they show Abraham Lincoln as a young kid. And he's got a little small hand axe, and of course they're working. But one of his best friends is this young black boy, and of course it's the time of slavery, and they see him getting dragged off, and the people who are dragging him off are like, no, 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 I'm a free man, because if you're born free at the time, even though you're black, you weren't considered a slave. And I guess maybe you had to produce papers or something. I don't know how real that is, but I imagine they didn't gloss over too much just because of how triggered everybody is today when it comes to racial issues. But what I liked about this setting it off is that you can see from the very beginning as a kid what drives him as far as the slavery bit. It wasn't, oh, he wanted to end the Civil War, so he just said, okay, let's end slavery. And then, yes, they're taking liberties with it to support an action film. I get it. That's all we're here to discuss. But it's neat how they
Mhm.
tie that in, because the guy who basically stops him from trying to save his friend is one of the vampire mini bosses that we see a little bit later on. So you see Abraham starting off as a young kid, getting to be where his mom ends up getting taken by the vampire and killed. Doesn't know why, but that also fuels him. His father dies a little bit later, and he's a young man, and he happens to have this chance encounter at a bar with somebody that's basically recruiting him. And says, "Oh, you can't go after him. You don't know what you're up against." And it's kind of neat how we see this kind of set up here from the beginning. So you mentioned here about the interaction of these two people. What did you think from that?
Well, when he was a kid, you talking about
Yes,
that? Oh, we're talking about
up
okay.
to
When he
up
was,
to where he gets the balls to go after the mini boss vampire.
I thought it was actually pretty good, and like I said, it's this showed a guy who he wasn't really that brave at first. He was brave, but then at the point, but then he's also like any other person. If you're gonna go and try to kill someone, most people you have a guilty conscience, you're gonna get shit faced drunk. You gotta get your nerve up.
Hmm.
So when he goes to shoot this guy, he like at first the gun doesn't work, and then he's hiding, and this guy's like, I'm gonna kill you and stuff. He fires the gun and he thinks he's dead, and it's like, it's like I his acting. I said it's it's good for this role. I'm
Yes.
not saying he's the greatest actor. I'm not saying he's the worst actor, but I'm saying it works as far as in that moment, he acts very human. You would be scared. You're not gonna be like, oh, I'm Blade. Screw you. Boom. Dead.
He is no Wesley Snipes.
No, no, but I love how as he gets goes through the movie, as he's trained by his friend Henry, who is a vampire hunter. He's the one that comes to actually save him, you rescue him from this guy. the guy you tried to kill, the guy who kills his mother,
Hmm.
the vampire. So and he trains him, and he basically throughout the movie he gives him like little side little missions. He'll give him a name, and then that's a vampire he has to go kill. And you see, and what's great about these things when he goes to kill these vampires at nighttime, he goes go one was a pharmacist, and the other one was
Banker.
forget banker. Yes, and the way he does it though is he's not like I'm like real badass, like you can't touch me. No, he takes a few licks,
Yes,
and
it's tough.
I love that. Yeah, yeah, it makes he's going to get something that's undead and stronger than him. Um, I love the aspect of it. He's still human, despite the fact that he's taking on these vampires. It makes it a little bit more believable. Where if he just goes in, like swings in or shoots them, and they're dead, they explode, turn to dust. No, this is like he actually has to behead these vampires. That's the only way to kill these vampires is beheading them.
Yeah,
So
and we find out early on too when he meets Henry. Henry, you don't know is a vampire himself until much later in the film, and you get a little bit of a backstory with what happened to Henry, and it of course parallels what happened with Abraham. So what's neat too is it's like I say, it's a beautiful shot film. Where they filmed it and just how it looks, you could almost say it's like a period piece too. But the thing with Abe is, to your point, he's well suited for the role, and you see him being kind of nervous. You see him being raised proper. You see him constantly reading. He gets the job in the little store with the guy that would end up being like his lifetime buddy. So you see his posse literally develop over the course of the film, and this is still like the first going into the second act of what's going on. There's a little bit of action, not a lot. You see very early on how he gets introduced to Mary, who's very beautiful, and they have chemistry, I think, together on screen. So you're like, okay, this is going to be the cute little power couple. Um, you wonder if anybody's going to cheat on each other or swerve or turn or any of those kinds of things, like a really bad wrestling thing. You don't want to see it coming. But the bad guys here, I think they do a good job in this movie of keeping them far enough away where you just know just enough about them. So as Abe is discovering, to your point, the banker, the pharmacist, the different vampires he's assigned to go kill, he just knows, hey, I got to go kill him. I got to just get it done. And he doesn't quite know the full extent of how far this goes, and we don't either until the movie matures. So it's not told to you all at once. Hey, there's a lot of vampires. There's one really old boss one. Well, let's go after him. No, 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 no. He's bringing him along. He's building up his success ratio, if you will. He's basically saying, when it's time, we'll do it. There's something bigger than you. But in addition to the vampire line, you're starting to see where he actually cares about himself going to school and getting educated, and the whole slavery issue because he meets his black childhood friend a little bit later as an adult, so they all know each other. You see how he feels like he gets pushed into a human life versus this, superhero type life on the side because it's hard. It's not easy killing all these vampires, and he's already a little bitter with his family, but he wants to get married. He wants to have the normal life. He doesn't want to have to do all that. And actually, that's what he does. He stops and basically says, okay, after chasing the mini boss guy on this really over the top horse chase with his silver tipped axe. I mean,
yes,
they go into the whole political part to this.
that was I can see that part being a little hokey. I remember when this movie came out, there were talks about that there's just too much CG, and like honestly, how could you do a vampire movie without doing CG, a little bit of CG, Because vampires can do things we can't do. They can jump real high, they can fly, or they can all that crap. It's kind of hard to do that with normal stuff. Yeah, so you could do the wires and stuff and all, but you kind of it's always easier to do with a computer, which I frown upon. But with certain movies, it's okay. Like this, I didn't mind it. This wasn't no Matrix, where it was all weird. You
Yeah,
know, this one of the great things about this movie is that you don't really notice this unless you know who this guy is Alan Tudyk plays Stephen Douglas in the movie. He's the one that he was courting Mary Todd in the beginning of the movie.
right.
And if you know Stephen or Alan Tudyk is from Firefly. He was also recently in Doom Patrol. He was the bad guy. It was called Mr. Nobody. So I mean, I didn't realize he was even in there until I actually saw him in there. Because I looked it up the cast, and they didn't even list him in the cast. I had to actually look him up and type his name in,
Hmm.
which I thought was really cool. The I mean, oh not I mean it's cool that he's in it, but I was kind of so it was not as cool that they didn't list him properly. He should have had like higher billing, but I think I don't think he's in there towards the end though. I think he's only in the beginning because that's when they're younger.
Yes, yes, that's when they're going through the courtship and getting married and getting ready to have their baby.
Uh, I would say I would have loved to see more of Alan Tudyk though, his character, as a young Stephen Douglas in this movie, because the fact, well, dude, Abraham Lincoln's courting his girl.
Yeah, I
I
know.
want,
I
I
know that
want,
they don't really get into that, but that is obvious early on when they're at the
yeah,
dance.
not, whether that's true or not. If they added liberty to that, I'm sure they probably added that to the story.
Right.
I don't know. Maybe they didn't. But I mean, I love how they have like some big names in here, but it's also left like they don't have too many big names here. I always say movies are better off when you don't have big name actors because you can actually get into the movie. You're not go I don't because
Yeah, if Tom Cruise
especially
is Abraham Lincoln,
yeah.
we wouldn't be buying it.
Well, as just, not just Tom Cruise, anybody. There's some people who hate certain celebrities, and then it ruins the whole entire movie for the experience for them. I always like it when you have a newcomer come in because you don't know. You can't judge them on based on stuff you don't really know what's been in. You base on their performance. You don't base on their previous performances.
Well, Nacho Ninja, which is a great name, by the way. Hello to you too as well. Um, Nacho Ninja, if indeed was a master of the black arts of ninjutsu, would know that some of the stuff in here is kind of hokey looking. But the one thing that I do like about the early action sequences is they're slightly different. They're very blade-like in that they're very stylistic. Um, but there's a certain anger that Abe has when he's doing these scenes, and the scene that comes to mind is when they do the A-team scene actually early on, where Henry brings them out into the pine forest, and he has an axe, because he doesn't know really about weapons and stuff, and he says, "Well, I used to be a rail splitter," and he has an axe, and he's like, "Well, okay, I want you to cut down this pine tree in one swoop." And he goes to hit it, and he's like, "Okay, this isn't working. What do you hate?" It's like, "Well, I hate vampires. I hate that my mom died, and this and that." But then you hear just a little bit of his voice, and he just kind of like powers through it. And at that point, you're getting a little bit of a chubby going, "Yeah, this is kind of hokey, but it's working. It's really, really cool." So you get to see these little bits of stylistic action sequences that happen, and then you realize, man, when this guy hits the switch, it's all going to be over. But to your point that you mentioned, all the little mini kills that he did is a struggle, and he's learning how to do it. But they're also
Mm-hmm.
somewhat creative, like the banker guy is melting gold down, and he's got the bellows, and he's got a fire going, and he ends up like stepping on the bellows. So he's kind of smart too. He can't obviously overpower the vampires, but really all this kind of comes down to is after he gets the mini boss that he remembers from a kid, his boss kind of says, "Hey man, this Abe guy's really killing stuff. We need to invite him to a ballroom." And I think a lot of people, whether they know this movie or not, they know about the ballroom scene. They go to I think down the Mississippi to I think it's New Orleans, I guess, and they're at this big old plantation. And what's neat here is you see all the slave houses on the side of the road as they're going up to the main house, and you basically see one hiding in it, but then they make the comment like, "Well, yeah, they're all empty," and of course you realize that what the master plan is, the vampires, the head one, want slavery to continue in the United States because that's what they used to feed off of, and that's rather convenient for him. So he has a political vested interest in slavery not passing, and Abe also has a personal interest in slavery not passing as well because he really doesn't believe in it, but also they killed his mom. So I liked how they had these like similar paths where you just knew they were going to meet at some point, which is basically going to be towards about the end of the movie. Yeah, the twirling axe, the man, yeah, this guy just looks so fluid doing it, and they do some zoom ins, and then they do something where you can see a lot of the blood splatter. And there's ballroom scene, they burst in because he's like, it's feeding time, and all the slaves are in there are really the feast. But Abe pops in there and just kicks ass, takes names, but gets overpowered. And they basically give him the option, well, you can do this, you can do that. You know, he barely manages to get out, but then that's just when it goes kind of like the last act where you see him basically hanging his axe up, doing the political thing. There's still stuff going on, but basically in an almost 2 hour movie, there's been some cool fight scenes evenly spread out, but you basically get one big, huge scene towards the end with the trains and all that. So before we get to that ending part to it, what did you want to say about this middle part of the film, Doctor?
The middle part where they're in the ballroom scene, I I was a little confused because his friend was in there. His friend Will, the one he that he rescued.
His childhood friend.
Yeah, childhood friend. Yeah. And I wasn't sure if he sent Will in there first as a spy, to see what's going on because he knew it was a trap, or Will was kidnapped. But either way, they're gonna hold Will hostage and all, and this Lord Vampire guy, and it must be his sister or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
They're
Who's
gonna, it was a
really
trap,
hot
obviously.
too,
Yeah,
by
so,
the way, in an undead
of
sort
course
of
she is.
way.
Yeah,
Sorry,
she
I just
she
had to
really.
throw that in.
I don't know. She's a biter and she probably sucks. I don't. I'm not. I mean, not in a good way, but
Yeah,
either.
she's a fighter, not
But
a lover.
she's an ankle
Well,
biter.
there's nice little touches in here, like they don't gloss over the slavery thing. That's vital to this movie. But in this scene here, he basically kills everything out. But while the vampire lord's talking to him, they've got this chair where they're sitting down on his neck and are looking down. Um, it's this old Gothic type plantation mansion, and a couple vampires are like stood on the top. So there's definitely some artsy little touches and flourishes that are put in here, not just for the action scenes. So I like it when a movie says, I want to sex it up, but I just don't want to do it in one aspect. I mean, we talk about Chuck Norris in the action scenes. We also talk about how the fact he was wearing a lot of interesting clothes, whether it was the tracksuit specials, the copious amounts of body hair, or even the turtlenecks. I mean, we like to point out where Chuck Norris kind of sexes it up in other areas, but in here, they do a great job of making you of letting you forget that it's a period piece, like to your point, in the 50s and 60s with things that they show. When they escape from here, they end up going down the river with some slaves, and they meet up kind of where they're at. And so this Underground Railroad that you see, they don't really mention it, comes into play in this last act because it turns out that as Abraham Lincoln is going through and he's suffering all these losses within the Civil War, he realizes that a big part of the army that he's up against are vampires. And vampires in this particular world, if you want to call it that, can't exist in sunlight. So you see, some battles going on, and everyone's just getting slaughtered. And somebody had said to Abe earlier in the movie, "Well, slavery is a complicated issue." And he goes, "No, it's pretty clear to me." And his conviction that you see him develop and feel very adamant about comes into play here because at the table he's just basically saying, "You know what? If we just have one more battle that we can figure out how to win," and he's holding the fork in his hand, and he realizes that's it. We're going to grab all the silver that we can, which is kind of like a nod in right before World War One when the government outlawed. Thank you, FDR, I believe it was, took everybody's gold and then of course doubled the value of it and created the Federal Reserve and screwed everything up. This is kind of like something similar with silver, where they confiscated all the silver, they melted it all down, they made all these bullets out of it, weapons. So you see out on the battlefield what's going to happen in the final battle, but they've got to get the silver there first. So what they do is they take all the silver, and it looks like a part of Abraham's posse turns on him, and the main vampire lord guy finds out that, hey, they're taking all the silver on this train to Gettysburg, so let's go get it. And so there's this big, huge thing on this train, and if everybody knows, a ballroom scene is great. The train scene is super cheesy. There's CGI in it. It's out of this world. It's better than anything in Train to Busan, in my opinion, just because it's more fun. But what happens is they get on a train and it's a swerve. His friend went in there as a double agent, and it turns out the silver went with the slaves on the Underground Railroad to the people on the ground for Gettysburg. So that's kind of the neat thing, is they just basically have this big last vampire battle on the train, and they barely escape from that, and it's over the top. But you see old Honest Abe getting his axe out, and then he heads over to Gettysburg where the war is going on, and his wife is kind of there helping direct things on, Mary. And so they're winning the battle of the war, and it's like the most crucial turn of it. But the vampire lord's sister, kind of, who snuck in and had killed their kid earlier that you saw, she's actually on the battlefield, and she sneaks up to get Mary, and then you see Mary basically shoot her with the silver necklace that was belonged to her, the child that died. And that was kind of neat to see Mary stand up and not just be a pretty figure. She seemed relatively competent here. So again, strong female performances in here. And then at the very end, of course, you see Abraham Lincoln standing up there in the middle of the field on stage, kind of giving a modified version, I suppose, because of the movie of the Gettysburg Address while he's going through. And I got to tell you, like I say, there's a little thing about seeing Abraham Lincoln in front of the field on this battle, giving the speech, talking, that just gives you goosebumps if you really like that sort of thing. But just the whole corniness of making this whole cover story about slavery and the Civil War with vampires, it works for me, and I think it's a great film. I think it's very entertaining. It's just I liked it more than I should have, and it was a guilty pleasure, and I didn't really want to say it, but as we were doing our top 10 Tuesdays and we did all this, he kind of ridiculed me in a way, as he does with movies that he thinks are really bad. But I got to tell you, for me, this movie's great enough to go see. So for you, Doctor, I'd like to give you the floor for any final comments or thoughts you'd like to have.
Just a warning to anybody who tries to steal Abe's axe. You're gonna get shot in the face.
And he's going to do it in a very humble manner.
I
Nacho
mean,
Ninja, if you've got
that
any comments, put them in. I'll get to them here as we close up.
that CG part where they're fighting on the horses, where he goes got the guy who killed his mother, the vampire. When they fall on the cliff, he's like, he's like, I got your axe. What are you gonna do? How he turns around and shoots him with the axe right in the face.
That was good. That was
Like
funny. And while the
so,
CGI is a little over the top, it still works. It gives you that sense of excitement here. It's not the Jason Bourne, 20 scenes in half a second.
yeah, I enjoyed this movie. I honestly I would love to see maybe George Washington Vampire Hunter. I don't know, maybe something else. You know,
I agree. I
or
think they
no
have
no no
something
no,
here.
no. George Washington Werewolf Hunter. There you go.
Yeah, there was an ending to the movie where they kind of part ways as friends, and this is kind of ironic in a sinister way. Well, I couldn't help but laugh. But at the end of the movie, Abe's old and he can't find his hat, and he just is going to go out on a date one evening for his wife, and she's like, I'll meet you in the carriage, and he sticks his head out the window and he's talking to his vampire buddy, basically saying, "Oh, this is it for me. We're done here." And he's old. You can tell he's moving slow, and his talk's a little slurred, a little different. He's like, "I can't find my hat." And Mary's like, "You left it on the table." And he's like, "I left it on the table," or whatever. And he's like, "Where are you going?" He's like, "Well, we're going to the theater." I'm sorry, but that was funny to me. And they show them kind of
Yeah,
right off. And that the reference is obviously where he gets assassinated, which I didn't think obviously they worked into the movie. But the epilogue is how the movie starts, where
I
his
kind of like the fact that they gave Anthony Mackie he wasn't a comedy role like he was in all his other movies, like he did in Marvel.
Mhm.
He was more of a serious role in this. So it's like I've seen other movies with him after he did played Falk and stuff, and they weren't really that great because he did comedy, and I don't like when he does comedy. I like the fact he was serious, so it's different, So, but yeah, this movie, dude, like if you've never seen this movie, like even if you think, oh, it looks corny, watch it, dude. I mean, there's some funny parts in this, yeah, and like any movie, like you may like it or you may not like it, but you should at least give it a shot.
Yeah, it was entertaining, and that's the bottom line. Whether it's good, bad, whether you think it's supposed to be a horror movie, it's not. That's why we put the action music with it today and put it with Kickin' It, which we've covered mostly martial arts movies, but it's an action channel. It's just we just love martial arts, and I thought the artistry, the pageantry of Abraham Lincoln twirling around with his axe. I mean, I couldn't believe it, and then I kind of was in a weird mood when I sat down to watch it the very first time, and I was like, I kind of like this. And it was a guilty pleasure, like I said, and I had no shame admitting this to anybody, and I had forgotten about it for a while until we started doing some of our lists. And yeah. Oh my God, a good movie, says Ahsoka. Love, love, love it. We were just finishing up talking about it too. If you got any quick comments, put them in. Eric Spring saying that this should have been a video, or not just saying this should have been a video game, not a movie. I want both. Because what I liked about this movie, and something that we've not talked about on the Extreme Movie Show, or the Two Extreme Horror Show, or our Sci Fi Show, or any of the movies that we've covered, some movies are great, and we talk about why we like them or don't like them. We talk about if they're fun, and fun's not the same thing as good. But I tell you, this movie's good. It's solid. It's fun. Yes, there's a little bit of unbelievable CGI in some parts, but it doesn't take away from what the film's trying to do. The acting by Abe is fantastic, and again, not only does it look good, it ends. And here's the most important point I was going to mention: it leaves you wanting to see another one. Am I right?
Yeah. For those who like, I guess Nacho Ninja, or you guys are into video games. If you like vampire video games, do you play the game Blood Rain? There's a PC version of both that one, and there's also a sequel to it as well. Well, unfortunately, the Blood Rain movie sucked. The whole franchise was killed, even though Christina Loken's kind of hot. So, I mean, she does have one sex scene where she's holding onto the jail cell while he's fucking her. But other than that, though, yeah, what a disappointing franchise that was. But that's another time, another story, another place, another
Well,
video.
well, vampires are certainly this is the vampire stuff I wanted rather than the Twilight nonsense or any of the other crap that's out. The emo type vampires. This is, you got enough of the backstory of what they could be, and of course, like I say, the epilogue is basically his
Oh,
buddy Henry setting up with somebody at a bar, and you don't know who it is, and it could be Teddy Roosevelt, it could be somebody else, it could be a lot of people, and if they could do another movie like this, to your point, with newer people, totally historic figures when they're young,
can we
and put something to it.
can we talk about the scene where the vampire kept disappearing on him? He moved real fast and it disappeared in a puff of smoke. So in order to track it, he was throwing rice at it,
Hmm.
and that's threw rice in the ground, and eventually threw rice, and it stuck to the. I believe that was the banker, right?
I think so. Yep.
Yeah. Dude, I mean, how awesome is that? I mean, like, is like, would you? I mean, at that point, would you really have thought to use anything like stick it to them? When you got an invisible vampire, he can just disappear and
Hmm.
reappear. Uh, and what's cool about that scene is like well, Henry went against two of those and defeated them. So not yeah, yeah. So I thought that was something that kind of connected him to Abraham because they both killed the same type of vampire. That was cool. So Henry, having experiences, them, probably told him about that, how they can disappear, and probably showed them like, here, just use this.
Well, some of the vampires actually look, I think, pretty dark. I mean, you mentioned earlier about how they look. Talk for a moment about how good the vampires actually look with practical effects.
Well, definitely. The very first vampire is the guy that killed his mother, and shoots him in the eyes, dude. Like he's like and this guy's got a freaking lead ball in his right eye.
Yeah, and he carries
And
it
he gets all
around.
he carries it around. Yeah. And so even though yeah, so what's funny is all that he still has it. But when he goes to go to kind of to turn into a vampire, he gets rolled doll. It almost looks like those what were those fish you see? They always hide it in the depths of the ocean, and they have like little orange ball light on, but they have the really razor sharp teeth. That's kind of what these are too. They have like not shark teeth, but they're like razor sharp needle type teeth.
Yeah, they're not sexy. They're very like
No, no,
animalistic.
no,
Like,
no, no. They are like you'd be shitting your pants. If when you came across one of these things, you know.
yeah, again, fantastic movie, a lot of fun. It's entertaining, and I think that's really what we want. Who cares if it's an A movie or a C movie? The dark nature of the way the vampires look, plus the earnestness of his performance. You can feel this like it's not necessarily being cartoonish, even though there's a few over the top CGI scenes. It works for me. So, Doctor, let me say thank you for joining and actually watching a movie that you hadn't seen before for this too. I always appreciate getting that millennial perspective, as I like to say with everybody else. So, yeah, I'm glad we like this movie, and we probably end up doing a deep dive on it at some point here in the future. So, like to
I,
say, go
I
ahead.
humbly, I just want to say I humbly like to refer myself as being as a Generation Y.
Well, there you go. All right, guys. I'd like to say thanks for showing up. We've gotten a lot of positive feedback about it. This is one that came up. Thank you if you voted on the Twitter poll for it. I know he was surprised about the fact that Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter beat out Avengers as far as entertaining films. And I remember clearly somebody who replied to me said, I kind of like this movie, and I could almost hear the shame dripping out of the person's comment because they almost didn't want to admit it, but they liked it so much that they went and responded to me on Twitter and actually said that. And you know what, I respect that a lot because you don't have to like the movies, you don't have to love them, but as long as we can talk about what makes them really good or bad, get a reaction. That's really what we're ultimately here doing. And again, we're only just touching the surface of the stuff that we want to do on the Extreme Movie Show. So we always appreciate the feedbacks, the retweets, the messages letting us know what movies you'd like us to cover. Because the Doctor and I are on here doing mostly action, some horror, sci-fi, and we're going to probably do a classic movie here soon, some old ones. We had a lot of responses to Humphrey Bogart. We may do another one of his or something else. But yeah, Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. Great, great film. Aloha and mahalo. Yes, Bianca. If you hadn't heard it, listen to us. Let us know what you think about it, because we really love this movie a lot, and we didn't know that we both would like it as much as we did till we just got through finishing talking about it. So if you guys all stay tuned, should be a link here soon, I think, for the top 10 movies of Angleton and I's list, which means 10 for me, 20 to 47 for him, for I think it's 2014, which not very good so far. But yeah, Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter, I think, was in my top 10 of 2012. As always, good evening and stay extreme.
Have a great night.
You're funny, Eric. Good night, everybody. Take care.
Stay extreme.